A girl, once and beautiful, ended up in a grave with a huge sickle across her neck. There were no signs of violence, no indications of any actual crime. Yet, someone was clearly terrified when they forced her into that grave. So scared that they even placed a padlock on the big toe of her left foot. They wanted her to stay in the tomb once and for all, fearing she might rise and take revenge on them. So, a whole community turned against a young lady who wasn't even over 20 years old, deeming her to be of ultimate danger. Do you see what I'm driving at? Let's test your historical knowledge. Who has been feared throughout human history to such an extent that commoners couldn't shake off that lingering sense of dread, even after their passing? If you say witches, warlocks, and vampires, you'd be completely correct. Just a little hint here. If you can't overpower someone physically, you can do it supernaturally. Well, that's at least what people used to think back in the 17th century. Not only was there a sickle and a padlock, but there were also signs of an attempt to twist the girl's corpse in the grave and turn it face down. This attempt had failed, leaving her spine buckled and twisted. By the way, the padlock wasn't necessarily meant to lock a vampire. It was more likely a talisman against evil spirits. That's a peculiar and, let's face it, very cruel way to bury someone. Yet it was a common practice for creating anti-vampire burial sites. The methods for preventing vampires from rising were quite elaborate. First off, let me introduce a term. Anti-vampire graves, known as revenant graves, date back thousands of years and have been found in various locations across Europe. Europe, you heard that right. Now before you say, hey, vampires are a Romanian thing, Dracula, duh, let me convince you otherwise. They are a part of all European folklore, meaning you can find references to them throughout Europe. With new settlements in America, vampire lore spread there too, eventually turning into the Twilight Saga. These anti-vampire burials are characterized by evidence of precautions taken to prevent those who bit the dust from rising. Such measures could include placing large stones on the deceased's legs or even piercing the body with a lance to fix it to the ground. To be completely safe, they could also consider removing the head from the torso. So, burying the body face down, cutting off the head, and pressing the body with a stone were the methods used to keep someone believed to be a demonic being from leaving the grave. Let's return to the poor lady, or rather, the girl. A couple of archaeologists, Dariusz Poliński and his partner, Magna Durodzka, who happened to be partners in both crime and life, stumbled upon her grave. Strangely, all of her 206 bones remained untouched. Yet no gravestone, no name, nothing. Just a lonely grave on a hill in northern Poland. Poliński, a professor of archaeology, and Zagrodzka began piecing together the story of the woman they eventually named Zosha. Carbon dating suggested she had been about 18 years old and had passed away about 350 years ago during a chaotic time in Poland's history. There is little documentation about this graveyard, which seemed to serve as a resting place for individuals marginalized by the community. Was Zosha a poor girl who had been marginalized because life forced her into the worst situation a lady could face? Not really. As the archaeologists delved deeper, they stumbled upon some hints that indicated she might have hailed from a rich family. Her burial featured a stylish bonnet, and the delicate silk along with shiny silver and gold threads found with it suggested that it was part of an elegant headdress. This all pointed to the idea that she had some serious status or wealth. But the way she was buried indicated her outsider status in the village of Pien. Perhaps her presence there was unwanted, hence the idea of her being a vampire, backed up by the manner in which she was forced into the grave and held there. By analyzing the structure of her skull and extricating DNA from her skeleton, scientists created a reconstruction of what her face might have looked like. The specialists meticulously reshaped Zosha's likeness using modeling clay on a 3D printed model of her skull, which proved to be a deeply moving experience. They remarked that while they often worked on face reconstructions, in this case, they also sought to restore her dignity. Utilizing these three methods, the team reconstructed Zosha's 400-year-old face, revealing the human story buried beneath supernatural beliefs. It's ironic, isn't it? First, people tried their hardest to make the world forget her face and prevent her from ever coming back. 400 years later, people did everything they could to bring her back to life. Her picture now is all over the internet, yet we will never see the faces of those who buried her. Alas, this reconstruction project only allows viewers to visually connect with Zosha, but her true story remains a mystery. But what we know for sure is that people who were deemed vampires were badly discriminated against, to say the least. Rumor had it that hungry vampires would even steal people to quench their thirst. Let's use math to prove this rumor wrong and prove that Zosha wasn't one of them. Back in the year 1600, there were only 537 million people worldwide. Yeah, this data may not be very accurate, but it's pretty close to reality. A physicist, Kostas Eftimiou, calculated that if a vampire had been drinking one person's blood each month, humanity would have faced extinction within a few years. Starting with one vampire and a population of 537 million in 1600, this math shows we'd have no humans left by July 1602. But here we are now. Well, while placing a stone on a corpse to make sure the vampire doesn't rise may be something new to you, there are also a bunch of stereotypical things associated with these creatures that you definitely know, such as garlic and mirrors. Funnily enough, even though it's all based on a bunch of superstitions, there's pretty good logic behind the garlic thing. You see, it contains a special compound called allicin, which is a powerful antibiotic. While people back then couldn't know what an antibiotic was, they noticed garlic was pretty effective against various conditions. Since they believed vampires were created by a particular blood condition, they also believed garlic could defeat a vampire. And there's more. There's actually a blood condition called porphyria, which makes people look like real vampires. Their skin is pale and their teeth get bigger as their gums shrink. And guess what? People who have porphyria cannot consume garlic, as it worsens their condition. Wow, that's a cool coincidence. The next superstition is a bit fresher, and it's about vampires avoiding mirrors. The first known reference to the mirrors comes from the book Dracula in 1897. But why wouldn't a vampire show a reflection? Simple. Before the plastic era we live in, mirrors were traditionally backed with silver. Silver was commonly believed to repel evil spirits, possibly because it has antimicrobial properties. Much like garlic, its healing properties may be what was supposed to scare off a vampire. Another reason why suspected vampires may have avoided mirrors is the changes to their appearance from conditions commonly confused with vampirism, like porphyria and rabies. People afflicted with these conditions may have avoided looking in mirrors for that reason, causing others to assume that vampires avoided mirrors. But if you ever met a vampire and these methods don't repel it, I have one more trick for you. Ask the potential vampire to count. It can be spilled grains, seeds, or even the holes in the fishing net if you happen to have one. Vampires are into math, so they'll stop to count, delaying them until sunrise. And we all know that vampires don't do well in sunlight. Ironically, it's Count Von Count, a vampire who teaches us how to count on Sesame Street.
That's it for today. So hey, if you pacified your curiosity, then give the video a like and share it with your friends. Or if you want more, just click on these videos and stay on the bright side.